The Crown Crest Club's grand hall shimmered under a constellation of crystal chandeliers, their golden light pooling on polished mahogany walls. Chicago's elites swirled through the room, their laughter sharp against the clink of champagne flutes. Maya Jackson stood at the edge of the crowd, her navy blazer a stark contrast to the sequin gowns and tailored tuxedos. Her practical bob haircut framed warm brown eyes that scanned the room, steady but guarded. She clutched her laptop, its weight grounding her as she prepared to present the tech upgrade that could modernize the club's outdated systems. This was her moment, earned through years of late nights and relentless precision as a data analyst. The boardroom doors loomed ahead, heavy oak carved with the club's crest, a silent gatekeeper to the world of power she'd fought to enter. She stepped forward, her sensible flats silent on the marble floor. The crowd parted, but not with respect. Eyes flicked over her, dismissive, as if she were a misplaced staff member rather than the lead on the club's most critical project. A woman in a pearl-encrusted gown raised an eyebrow, whispering to her companion. The words, "out of place," floated past, sharp as a blade. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her gaze forward, her heart a steady drumbeat beneath her composed exterior. She'd faced rooms like this before, rooms that measured worth by wealth and pedigree, not talent. But tonight, she carried the future of the Crown Crest in her hands. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with cigar smoke and entitlement. 12 board members sat around a gleaming walnut table, their faces etched with the arrogance of old money. Elliot Grayson, the club's president, presided at the head, his silver hair catching the light like a crown. His tailored suit hugged a frame that exuded charisma, but his smile was a polished weapon, warm to those he deemed worthy, cold to those he didn't. He glanced at Maya, his eyes skimming her as if she were a footnote. "Let's make this quick," he said, his voice smooth but laced with disdain. "We have a gala to attend." Maya nodded, her fingers brushing the laptop's cool surface. She stepped to the front, where a projector hummed faintly, its lens pointed at a blank screen. The room's opulence pressed against her, the crystal decanters glinting on a sideboard, the soft tick of a grandfather clock, the faint scent of leather and wealth. She opened her presentation, her voice clear as she began. "The Crown Crest's current system is vulnerable to breaches. My upgrade will secure member data, streamline operations, and cut costs by 20%. She clicked to the first slide, but the projector flickered, casting a jagged shadow across the screen. She clicked again. Nothing. The screen went black. A murmur rippled through the room. A board member, his jowls heavy with age, leaned back, smirking. "Typical," he muttered, loud enough for all to hear. His eyes locked on Maya, the word a barb aimed at her modest appearance, her outsider status. Another board member, a younger man with a slick-back hairstyle, chuckled, covering his mouth as if it were an accident. The laughter spread, low and cruel, like a tide pulling her under. Maya's fingers froze on the laptop, her pulse quickening. She rebooted the projector, her movements precise despite the heat rising in her chest. The screen flickered again, then died completely. The room's silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of a board member's glass as he sipped his bourbon. Elliot leaned forward, his smile tightening. "Ms. Jackson, perhaps you're not prepared for this." His tone was polite, but the subtext was clear: "You don't belong here." Maya met his gaze, her warm brown eyes unyielding, though inside, the sting of his words cut deep. She'd spent months perfecting this system, testing every line of code, anticipating every question. This wasn't a mistake. The projector had worked flawlessly in her trials. Her mind raced, tracing the setup, the cables, the hands that had touched the equipment before she arrived. Someone had tampered with it. The realization hit like a cold wave, but she kept her face neutral, her voice steady. "I'll switch to a manual overview," she said, opening her laptop to project directly. The board members shifted, their impatience palpable. The jowly man snorted, muttering to his neighbor, "Why do they hire people like her for this?" The word "her" carried a weight that went beyond her role, landing on her modest clothes, her single mom status, her lack of a prestigious last name. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up her charts, but she forced them still. She spoke, her voice rising above the room's disdain, detailing encryption protocols and cost savings with the precision of a surgeon. But the board wasn't listening. Elliot checked his watch. Another member scrolled his phone. The younger man whispered something to his neighbor, and a stifled laugh broke the air. Maya's chest tightened, each dismissal a brick added to a wall she'd spent years climbing. She thought of her daughter, asleep in their small apartment, the reason she endured these rooms, these gazes. She pushed forward, her voice unwavering, but the room's indifference was a physical force, pressing her down. The grandfather clock chimed, its deep toll echoing like a judgment. Elliot raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "That's enough, Ms. Jackson. We'll review your proposal later. If it's salvageable." The word hung in the air, sharp and final. The board members rose, their chairs scraping as they filed out, leaving Maya alone with her dead projector and the echo of their scorn. She stood frozen, the laptop screen casting a faint glow on her face. The hall outside buzzed with gala preparations, the elite laughing as if she'd never existed. Her fingers brushed the simple silver ring on her left hand, a habit born of years, its faint engraving worn but familiar. The sting of their dismissal wasn't new, but it burned deeper here, in this room of power she'd fought to enter. She closed her laptop, her movements deliberate, her eyes tracing the crest on the wall, a symbol of exclusion disguised as prestige. The board thought they'd silenced her, buried her in their laughter and faulty tech. But they had no idea, she wasn't just a guest. Maya stood alone in the dimly lit tech closet of the Crown Crest Club, the gala's distant hum seeping through the walls like a taunting echo. The air smelled of dust and old wiring, a sharp contrast to the opulence she'd just left. Her laptop sat on a cluttered shelf, its screen dark, mirroring the weight in her chest. She leaned against the wall, her navy blazer creasing, her warm brown eyes tracing the faint cracks in the concrete floor. The board's laughter still rang in her ears, their dismissive glances carving deeper than words. She wasn't new to being overlooked, but tonight's sabotage, the tampered projector, the calculated scorn, felt like a wound reopened, raw and pulsing with memory. Her fingers brushed the silver ring on her left hand, its worn engraving a quiet anchor. She closed her eyes, and the closet faded. She was 14 again, standing in a small Chicago apartment, the air thick with the scent of burnt toast and her mother's exhaustion. Her mother, a seamstress with calloused hands, knelt before her, slipping the ring onto her finger. "This was your grandmother's," she'd said, her voice soft but fierce. "She wore it through every fight, every door slammed in her face. It's your armor now, Maya." That night, her mother had promised her a future beyond their cramped world, a future Maya could build with her mind. But weeks later, a car accident stole her mother, leaving Maya an orphan, the ring her only tether to that promise. The memory stung, sharp and unrelenting. Maya opened her eyes, her breath uneven. She'd clawed her way from foster homes to college scholarships, from sleepless nights coding to this job at the Crown Crest, all for her daughter, Emma, now 8, who slept with a stuffed bear and dreams bigger than their tiny apartment. Every line of code Maya wrote, every presentation she perfected, was for Emma's future, a world where doors wouldn't slam shut because of who they were. But tonight, the board's disdain reminded her of those early years, foster parents who called her trouble, teachers who skipped her raised hand, social workers who saw her as a file, not a girl with a fire inside. She slid to the floor, her back against the wall, the cold concrete grounding her. The ring glinted faintly under the flickering fluorescent light, its engraving, 2 crossed keys, barely visible. Her mother's voice echoed, not just from that night, but from 1,000 moments, "You're enough, Maya. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Yet here she was, in the heart of Chicago's elite, reduced to a punchline. The sabotage wasn't just about her presentation, it was a message. Stay in your place. Her chest tightened, not with anger, but with a bone-deep fatigue. How many times would she have to prove herself? How many rooms would she enter, only to be pushed out? She pulled her knees close, her fingers tracing the ring's edge. A memory surfaced, unbidden. At 16, she'd stood before a high school science fair, her project, a basic AI model, winning first place. The judge, a kind-eyed woman, had leaned in, whispering, "You're going to change the world, kid." But later, a classmate's father, a wealthy donor, had scoffed, "Nice hobby, but tech's not for girls like you." The words had lodged in her, a splinter she couldn't remove. She'd vowed then to never let them win, to build a life where her work spoke louder than their prejudice. Yet tonight, in this closet, that vow felt fragile, like a promise she might not keep. The gala's music swelled outside, a violin's mournful note slipping through the door. Maya's gaze fell on her laptop, its silent screen a reminder of her failure, or their trap. She stood, her movements slow, deliberate. She opened the laptop, her fingers hovering over the keys. The presentation was still there, every chart, every code snippet, a testament to her sleepless nights. She could walk away, let the board's dismissal bury her work, or she could fight. Not with shouts, but with the quiet precision that had carried her this far. Her mother's ring gleamed, a small defiance against the dark. She wasn't done yet. But what they didn't know was the secret she carried, etched in metal, waiting to unravel their world. The tech closet's fluorescent light buzzed faintly, casting jagged shadows as Maya sat on the cold floor, her laptop glowing with the presentation she refused to abandon. Outside, the Crown Crest Club's gala pulsed with laughter, but in here, the air was still, heavy with her resolve. Her warm brown eyes narrowed, scanning lines of code she'd written for months. The sabotage wasn't random, it was a calculated move to keep her invisible. Her fingers paused on the silver ring, its crossed keys engraving catching the light. Then, a soft knock broke the silence. Lila Torres, a junior staff member with curly hair and a quick smile, stood at the door, her vibrant energy muted by hesitation. "Maya, you okay?" she asked, her voice a tentative thread in the dark. Maya looked up, her guard softening. Lila's presence was a flicker of warmth in the club's cold hierarchy. The younger woman stepped inside, her sneakers squeaking on the concrete. "I saw what happened in there," Lila said, her eyes darting to the laptop. "That projector was fine this morning. I checked it myself." The words hung between them, sharp and unspoken. Someone had tampered with it. Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her face steady, her mind racing. Lila's observation was a spark, a small tremor that shifted the ground beneath her. She stood, brushing dust from her navy blazer, her movements deliberate, as if the act itself could steady her. Lila fidgeted, her fingers twisting a stray curl. "I don't know why they treat you like that," she said, her voice dropping. "You're the best we've got." The compliment landed softly, but it stirred something in Maya, a memory of being seen, not dismissed. She thought of her daughter, Emma, whose crayon drawings of Mom the Hero papered their fridge. Emma's belief in her was a fire Maya couldn't let die. She met Lila's gaze, her voice calm but firm. "Thanks, Lila. But I need to fix this my way." The younger woman nodded, her eyes lingering on Maya's ring, a fleeting curiosity flickering across her face. The closet's air grew warmer, the hum of the gala seeping through like a distant tide. Maya opened her laptop again, her fingers moving with purpose, pulling up a diagnostic tool she'd built for the club's systems. Lines of data scrolled past, a digital pulse that felt like her own heartbeat. She wasn't just fighting for her presentation now, she was fighting for every moment she'd been overlooked, every door slammed shut. Lila hovered, her presence a quiet allyship. "You're not giving up, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya's lips curved, not a smile, but a spark of defiance. "Not today," she said, her eyes locked on the screen. The diagnostic tool pinged, a soft chime that cut through the closet's stillness. A single line of code flagged an anomaly in the projector's firmware, tampered with hours before her presentation. Maya's breath caught, the evidence as clear as a fingerprint. Someone had wanted her to fail, to fade into the background of the Crown Crest's polished world. The realization was a jolt, not of fear, but of clarity. She wasn't just a data analyst, she was a woman who'd survived worse than their games. The ring on her finger felt heavier, its keys a reminder of doors she'd unlocked before. Lila leaned closer, her eyes wide. "What's that mean?" she asked, pointing at the screen. Maya didn't answer, her mind already tracing the next step, a plan forming in the quiet. They thought they'd buried her, but something was stirring, and it wasn't just code. The tech closet's flickering light buzzed like a trapped insect, casting Maya's shadow across the cluttered shelves as she hunched over her laptop. The screen's glow illuminated her warm brown eyes, now sharp with focus, tracing the anomaly in the projector's firmware. The sabotage was deliberate, a digital knife aimed at her credibility. Lila Torres lingered nearby, her curly hair catching the light, her quick smile replaced by a nervous energy. The gala's muffled music pulsed through the walls, a reminder of the world that had dismissed Maya. Her fingers brushed the silver ring on her left hand, its crossed keys engraving a quiet pulse of strength. She wasn't just fighting for her job, she was fighting for every moment she'd been erased. Lila shifted, her sneakers scuffing the concrete. "Maya, what's next?" she asked, her voice low, as if afraid to break the spell of Maya's concentration. Maya didn't look up, her fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up the club's internal network logs. "We find who did this," she said, her tone steady but laced with steel. The logs loaded, a cascade of timestamps and user IDs. Maya's mind churned, mapping the data like a chessboard. Someone with access had altered the projector's settings hours before her presentation, betting she'd crumble under the board's scorn. But they'd underestimated her. The closet's air grew heavy, the hum of the laptop fan blending with the distant clink of champagne glasses. Lila leaned closer, her eyes wide. "Can you really trace it?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and doubt. Maya nodded, her gaze locked on the screen. A user ID caught her eye, Egrayson. Elliot Grayson. Her breath hitched, but she kept her face neutral. It was too obvious, too sloppy for the club's polished president. Someone was using his credentials, or he'd been careless. Either way, it was a thread she could pull. She cross-referenced the ID with access records, her fingers a blur, the ring glinting with each movement. Lila's gaze drifted to the ring, her brow furrowing. "That ring," she said softly, almost to herself. "It's familiar." Maya's hand froze for a fraction of a second, her heart skipping. She glanced at Lila, who was staring now, her eyes narrowing as if trying to solve a puzzle. "I've seen that design somewhere," Lila continued, her voice trailing off. "Maybe in the club's archives. Old photos?" Maya's chest tightened, but she forced a casual shrug, her voice light. "Just a family heirloom," she said, redirecting Lila's attention to the screen. But Lila's words lingered, a spark that could ignite something dangerous. The laptop pinged, a new log entry flashing. The sabotage traced to a secondary account linked to the club's IT manager, a man Maya had seen hovering near Elliot's office, his loyalty as clear as his tailored suits. Her mind raced, connecting dots. The IT manager answered to the board, to Elliot. This wasn't just about her presentation, it was about protecting the club's traditional hierarchy, a world where people like Maya, single mothers, outsiders, were kept at the edges. The realization burned, but it also clarified her path. She wasn't just a data analyst, she was a survivor, and survivors don't break, they build. Lila's eyes flicked back to the ring, her curiosity unquenched. "You sure it's just an heirloom?" she asked, her tone teasing but probing. Maya met her gaze, her warm brown eyes steady, giving nothing away. "It's just a ring, Lila," she said, but her voice carried a weight that made Lila pause. The younger woman nodded, but her expression held a flicker of doubt, as if she sensed there was more to Maya than the quiet analyst she knew. The closet's light flickered, casting their shadows in a dance across the walls, the air thick with unspoken questions. Maya closed the log window, opening a new tool, a data scraper she'd built to analyze the club's operational patterns. If the sabotage was part of a larger scheme, there'd be traces elsewhere, in hiring records, vendor contracts, member complaints. Her fingers moved with precision, the ring a silent metronome on her hand. The scraper hummed, pulling files from the club's servers, each one a potential key to unraveling the board's game. She thought of her daughter, Emma, asleep with her stuffed bear, dreaming of a world where her mom was a hero. That dream was Maya's fuel, burning brighter than the board's disdain. Lila watched, her nervous energy shifting to admiration. "You're like a detective," she said, her voice soft but earnest. Maya's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Just doing my job," she said, but her mind was elsewhere, tracing the ring's history, the promise it held. Her mother had worn it through her own battles, a seamstress fighting for dignity in a city that saw her as less. The crossed keys weren't just decoration, they were a symbol, tied to a legacy Maya had buried to survive. But tonight, that legacy was stirring, whispering of truths she couldn't ignore. The scraper pinged, a file loading, a decade-old membership ledger, buried in the club's archives. Maya's breath caught as she scanned it, her eyes locking on a name, her mother's. Not as a member, but as a contractor, listed alongside a cryptic note, Keyholder Project. Her heart pounded, the ring suddenly heavy. Lila didn't notice, her attention on the screen, but Maya's world tilted. The club wasn't just a workplace, it was a ghost from her past, and the ring was no mere heirloom. It was evidence, a link to something the board, or Elliot, might kill to keep buried. The gala's music swelled, a violin's wail cutting through the closet's stillness. Lila's gaze lingered on Maya, her curiosity now a quiet suspicion. "You're not just here for the tech, are you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Maya didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the ledger, her mind racing. The board thought they'd silenced her with a broken projector, but they'd awakened something older, deeper. The ring's keys weren't just a memory, they were a map, leading to a truth that could shatter the Crown Crest's polished facade. And someone, somewhere, was about to notice she held the key. The tech closet's dim light flickered, casting jagged shadows as Maya's laptop hummed, its screen a constellation of data that held the Crown Crest Club's secrets. Her warm brown eyes burned with focus, the silver ring on her finger glinting as she scrolled through the decade-old ledger. Her mother's name, listed under Keyholder Project, was no coincidence. The club wasn't just a workplace, it was a vault of truths she'd buried to survive. Lila Torres stood nearby, her curly hair catching the faint glow, her quick smile gone, replaced by a quiet intensity. The gala's distant music throbbed, a mocking reminder of the board's dismissal, but Maya's pulse was louder, driven by the weight of what she'd uncovered. The ring's crossed keys weren't just a memory, they were a weapon, and she was ready to wield it. Lila's voice broke the silence, soft but urgent. "Maya, what's that file?" She pointed at the ledger, her eyes wide with curiosity. Maya hesitated, her fingers pausing on the keyboard. Lila's suspicion was growing, and the truth was too heavy to share yet. "Just old records," Maya said, her voice calm but firm, redirecting Lila's gaze to the screen. But her mind was racing, piecing together the sabotage, the ledger, and the ring. The projector's tampering was a small move in a larger game, one meant to keep her, and others like her, out of the club's inner circle. The Keyholder Project hinted at something deeper, a legacy tied to her mother, and possibly to the club's founding. Maya closed the ledger, opening her data scraper again. She needed evidence, not just of the sabotage, but of the club's broader patterns, hiring biases, vendor favoritism, member exclusions. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, the ring a silent metronome. The scraper hummed, pulling files, emails, contracts, complaints buried in the club's servers. One email chain caught her eye, sent between Elliot Grayson and the IT manager, discussing streamlining presentations and avoiding disruptions. The language was vague, but the timing, hours before her presentation, was damning. Her breath caught, the pieces falling into place. They hadn't just wanted her to fail, they'd orchestrated it to protect their world of privilege. Lila leaned closer, her breath quickening. "That's Elliot's email," she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and awe. Maya nodded, her jaw tight. The board's disdain, the tampered projector, the ledger, it all pointed to a system designed to exclude. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She opened a new window, her diagnostic tool now linked to the club's live network. If she could access the boardroom's backup system, she could project her findings directly, bypassing the sabotaged equipment. It was a risk, but silence was no longer an option. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "You're enough, Maya." Tonight, she'd prove it. The closet's air grew thick, the hum of the laptop fan blending with the gala's distant violin. Maya's fingers flew, hacking into the boardroom's auxiliary projector, a system she'd upgraded months ago, unnoticed by the board. The screen flickered, then stabilized, mirroring her laptop. She uploaded her presentation, but this time, she added a new slide, a data visualization of the club's discriminatory practices. Charts showed skewed hiring, vendor contracts favoring board allies, and complaints from minority members ignored. The numbers were stark, undeniable, a digital indictment of the Crown Crest's traditional hierarchy. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. This was her stand. Lila's eyes widened, her voice a hushed gasp. "You're going to show this? Now?" Maya met her gaze, her warm brown eyes unyielding. "They wanted me silent," she said. "They get the truth instead." She hit enter, and the boardroom's projector whirred to life, its light spilling through the club's network. In the grand hall, the gala paused, heads turning as the massive screen above the bar flickered. Maya's face appeared, not as the dismissed analyst, but as a force, her voice steady as she began. "The Crown Crest Club has a problem," she said, her words echoing through the hall. "And it's not my projector." The crowd froze, champagne flutes mid-air, as her charts loaded, hiring data showing only 5% minority staff, vendor payments skewed to board-connected firms, complaints from non-white members dismissed. Gasps rippled, faces paling under the chandelier's glow. Elliot Grayson, standing near the bar, stiffened, his silver hair catching the light as his smile vanished. The board members, scattered among the guests, exchanged panicked glances, their whispers drowned by Maya's voice. "This isn't a glitch," she continued, her tone calm but piercing. "This is a pattern, and it ends tonight." The room felt like slow motion, eyes widening, breaths held, as the elite faced a mirror they couldn't ignore. Maya's fingers brushed the ring, its keys a quiet anchor. The ledger's mention of her mother flashed in her mind, not just a contractor, but a keyholder, a term tied to the club's founding families. The ring wasn't an heirloom, it was a marker, proof of a legacy the board had erased. She didn't reveal it yet, her mother's story was hers to protect, but the data was enough, a wrecking ball to the club's facade. Lila stared at the screen, her hands clasped, her voice a whisper. "You did it," she said, tears in her eyes. Maya didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the laptop, the weight of her stand settling in. The gala's violin faltered, the silence deafening as Maya's final slide loaded, a single question, stark against the screen. Who benefits from silence? The words hung, a challenge to every guest, every board member, every whispered sneer. Elliot's face twitched, his charisma cracking as he stepped forward, his voice low. "Turn it off," he hissed to a staff member, but the crowd's murmurs grew, some nodding, others filming on their phones. Maya's data was viral, unstoppable, a truth no one could unsee. She leaned back, her navy blazer creased, her ring glinting. They'd tried to bury her, but she'd just rewritten their story. And the real twist was still to come. The grand hall of the Crown Crest Club stood frozen, the chandelier's golden light casting long shadows over the stunned gala guests. Maya's damning charts lingered on the massive screen above the bar, their stark numbers, 5% minority staff, skewed vendor contracts, ignored complaints, burning into the silence. Her final question, who benefits from silence, pulsed like a heartbeat, its words a mirror to the elite's polished hypocrisy. Maya, still in the tech closet, watched the live feed on her laptop, her warm brown eyes steady, the silver ring on her finger glinting under the flickering light. Lila Torres stood beside her, her curly hair framing wide, teary eyes, her breath shallow with awe. The air was thick, electric, as if the club itself held its breath. In the hall, Elliot Grayson's silver hair caught the light as he pushed through the crowd, his tailored suit creased with urgency. His charisma, once a weapon, now faltered, his face pale as he hissed at a staff member, "Shut it down, now." But the projector hummed on, Maya's work untouchable in the club's auxiliary system. Guests murmured, some clutching phones, filming the screen, their whispers a rising tide. A board member, the jowly man who'd sneered, typical, during Maya's presentation, stood rooted, his bourbon glass trembling in his hand. His eyes darted to Elliot, then away, shame creeping into his scowl. Another board member, the younger man with slick back hair, flushed red, his earlier laughter now a ghost haunting his silence. Maya leaned back in the closet, her navy blazer creased, her fingers brushing the ring's crossed keys. She'd expected chaos, maybe outrage, but this quiet reckoning was heavier, more profound. The board hadn't just dismissed her, they'd underestimated her, assuming a single mother, an outsider, would fold under their scorn. But she'd turned their trap into a stage, her data a spotlight on their prejudice. Lila's voice broke through, soft but firm. "They're not laughing now," she said, her eyes locked on the feed. Maya nodded, her jaw tight, but she stayed composed, her heart a steady drumbeat. This wasn't vengeance, it was justice, delivered with the precision of her code. In the hall, a woman in a pearl-encrusted gown, who'd whispered, out of place, as Maya entered, stepped back, her hand at her throat. Her companion, a man in a tuxedo, met her gaze, his expression shifting from discomfort to doubt. "Did you know about this?" he asked, his voice low. She shook her head, but her eyes betrayed her, flickering with guilt. Other guests, neutral until now, began to nod, some clapping softly, their applause a tentative ripple against the board's silence. A younger member, a tech entrepreneur in a sleek blazer, turned to his date, whispering, "She's right. I've seen those complaints ignored." The tide was turning, not with shouts, but with quiet realization, a crack in the club's facade. Elliot reached the screen, his voice rising, smooth but strained. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, addressing the crowd, his smile forced. "We'll investigate, ensure fairness." But his words fell flat, drowned by the weight of Maya's evidence. A guest, an older woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward, her voice cutting through. "Fairness? Your board ignored my son's application. He's qualified, but not your kind of member." The crowd murmured louder, phones flashing as they recorded, the moment spiraling beyond Elliot's control. He froze, his silver hair stark against his flushed face, a king dethroned by data. In the closet, Maya's fingers hovered over her laptop, her breath steady. She could have pushed further, exposed the keyholder project, her mother's name, the ring's true weight. But she held back, her mother's story a flame she'd protect until the time was right. Her stand was enough for now, a spark that had ignited the room. Lila touched her arm, her voice a whisper. "You're incredible," she said, tears streaking her face. Maya met her gaze, her warm brown eyes softening. "I just did what was right," she said, her voice low, but the ring on her finger felt heavier, its keys a promise she'd yet to fully claim. The hall's violinist, silent until now, struck a single, mournful note, as if mourning the club's old ways. The board members shrank, their authority unraveling under the guests' shifting gazes. The jowly man set down his glass, his hands shaking, and muttered to a colleague, "We should have listened." The younger board member, his face still red, slipped toward the exit, avoiding eyes. Elliot stood alone, his charm a broken shield, his silence louder than any apology. The Crown Crest Club's grand hall buzzed with a new energy, the chandelier's golden light now a spotlight on the unraveling elite. Maya's chart still glowed on the massive screen, their numbers, 5% minority staff, skewed vendor contracts, ignored complaints, a silent indictment that echoed louder than the gala's fading violin. Guests whispered, phones flashing as they recorded, the air thick with a reckoning. In the tech closet, Maya leaned against the cluttered shelf, her navy blazer creased, her warm brown eyes reflecting the laptop's dim glow. The silver ring on her finger, its crossed keys glinting, felt heavier, a tether to a legacy she hadn't yet fully claimed. Lila Torres stood beside her, her curly hair framing a face lit with awe, her quick smile returning as she watched the live feed. The board's silence was their surrender, but Maya's stand was far from over. Lila's voice cut through the closet's hum, vibrant with conviction. "You changed everything out there," she said, her eyes shining. "I've never seen the board so quiet." Maya met her gaze, her jaw tight, but a flicker of warmth softened her expression. She'd exposed the club's truth, not for applause, but for her daughter, Emma, and every outsider who'd been dimmed by rooms like this. Yet Lila's words stirred something deeper, a reminder that her fight wasn't just hers. The younger woman stepped closer, her sneakers scuffing the concrete, her voice dropping to a fervent whisper. "I need to say something, Maya. You've shown me what it means to stand up." Lila's hands trembled, but her eyes were steady, a fire kindled by Maya's courage. "I've worked here 2 years," she said, her words rushing out. "I've seen how they treat people like us, staff, outsiders, anyone who doesn't fit their mold. I kept my head down, thought that's how you survive. But you didn't. You fought, and now I get it." She paused, her breath catching, her curly hair catching the flickering light. "Because of you, I believe I can matter too." The words hung, raw and unpolished, a viral spark that could light up 1,000 screens. Maya's chest tightened, not with pride, but with the weight of Lila's trust, a responsibility she hadn't sought but couldn't refuse. In the hall, the crowd's murmurs grew, a tide of voices demanding change. A young guest, the tech entrepreneur in a sleek blazer, climbed onto a chair, his voice ringing out. "This club's been a gatekeeper too long," he said, pointing at the screen. "Maya Jackson's shown us the truth. Who's with her?" Applause erupted, tentative at first, then thunderous, shaking the mahogany walls. Elliot Grayson, his silver hair stark against his pale face, stood frozen near the bar, his tailored suit no shield against the crowd's shift. The jowly board member, his bourbon glass long abandoned, muttered to a colleague, his voice low. "She's got them all now." His tone wasn't anger, but resignation, a crack in the board's armor. Lila turned to Maya, her eyes blazing with purpose. "I want to help," she said, her voice firm. "I've seen things, emails, meetings, stuff they thought I wouldn't notice. I can back you up." Maya studied her, seeing not just a junior staff member, but a younger version of herself, vibrant, underestimated, ready to fight. She nodded, her voice quiet but resolute. "Then stay close, Lila. This isn't over." The ring on her finger gleamed, its keys a reminder of the Keyholder project, her mother's name in the ledger, a truth still buried. Lila's offer was a spark, a new ally in a battle that was growing larger than Maya had planned. The closet's fluorescent light buzzed, casting their shadows in a restless dance. Maya opened her laptop again, pulling up the club's member database. If the Keyholder project was tied to the club's founding, there'd be traces, names, dates, contracts linking her mother to the elite who'd built this place. Her fingers moved with precision, the ring a silent metronome, but her mind flashed to Emma, asleep with her stuffed bear, her crayon drawings of Mom the Hero, a beacon. This fight was for her, but now, with Lila's stand, it was for every young woman who'd been told to stay small. The database loaded, names scrolling past, but one caught her eye, a founding member's surname, the same as the IT manager's. A connection, subtle but real, to the sabotage. In the hall, the older woman who'd spoken of her son's rejected application stepped forward again, her sharp eyes locking on Elliot. "Resign," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the applause. Others joined, their voices a chorus, "Resign. Change the board." Elliot's face twitched, his charisma crumbling, but he raised his hands, his voice strained. "We'll address this," he said, but the crowd wasn't listening. Phones flashed, live streams capturing the moment, the club's reckoning going viral. The younger board member, his slick back hair disheveled, slipped out a side door, his exit a silent admission of defeat. The tide had turned, and Maya's data was its current. Lila's hand grazed Maya's arm, her voice soft but fierce. "They're listening because of you," she said, tears brimming again. Maya's gaze softened, her warm brown eyes meeting Lila's. "No," she said, her voice low. "They're listening because people like you are ready to speak." Lila's smile broke through, radiant, a mirror to the fire Maya had lit. The closet's air felt lighter, the gala's music a distant hum, no longer mocking but fading. Maya's fingers brushed the ring, its keys a promise, of her mother's fight, of Emma's future, of a world where no one had to prove they belonged. The hall's applause swelled, a wave crashing against the club's old walls. Guests began chanting Maya's name, a rhythm that echoed her heartbeat. Lila pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed, posting a clip of the screen to social media, tagging journalists, activists, anyone who'd amplify the truth. "This is for all of us," she whispered, hitting send. Maya watched, her resolve hardening. The board had tried to silence her, but they'd only amplified her voice. The keyholder project, the ring, her mother's legacy, they were pieces of a puzzle she'd solve, but for now, Lila's stand was proof, the fight was no longer hers alone. Something bigger was coming, and the club wasn't ready. The tech closet's fluorescent light flickered, its buzz a faint echo of the Crown Crest Club's unraveling gala beyond the walls. Maya stood, her navy blazer straightened, the silver ring on her finger glinting with its crossed keys engraving, a quiet testament to her mother's fight and her own. Her laptop, now closed, had done its work, its data shattering the club's facade on the Grand Hall's screen. Lila Torres stood beside her, her curly hair catching the dim glow, her quick smile radiant with newfound courage. The air was warm, charged with the afterglow of their stand, but Maya's warm brown eyes held a deeper resolve. She'd exposed the club's bias, but the weight of the keyholder project, her mother's name in the ledger, urged her to heal, not just fight. Lila's phone buzzed, notifications flooding from her viral post, the clip of Maya's chart spreading across social media. "They're calling you a hero," Lila said, her voice trembling with pride. Maya shook her head, her gaze softening. "I'm no hero," she said, her voice low. "I'm just a mom who's tired of closed doors." Her fingers brushed the ring, its keys a reminder of Emma, her daughter, whose dreams fueled every line of code she'd written. But Lila's words, her stand, had shifted something in Maya. This wasn't just about tearing down, it was about building a world where Emma, Lila, and others wouldn't need to prove they belonged. Maya opened the closet door, the gala's hum washing over them, no longer mocking but alive with change. She stepped into the hallway, Lila following, the marble floor cool under her sensible flats. The grand hall loomed ahead, its chandeliers casting golden light over a crowd still buzzing from her presentation. Guests chanted her name, their applause a wave, but Maya's focus was inward, her mother's voice echoing, "You're enough, Maya." The ring, once a source of pain, now felt like a beacon, its keys urging her to let go, to forgive, not for the board, but for herself, for Emma, for the future. In the hall, the screen had gone dark, but Maya's question, who benefits from silence, lingered in the air, a challenge that had reshaped the room. Elliot Grayson stood near the bar, his silver hair disheveled, his tailored suit creased, his charisma a faded mask. The jolly board member, his face heavy with shame, avoided her gaze, his bourbon glass forgotten. Guests milled, some approaching Maya, their voices a mix of gratitude and awe. A young woman, a server with tired eyes, touched her arm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought no one saw us." Maya's chest tightened, the words a mirror to her own years of invisibility. She nodded, her warm brown eyes meeting the server's. "I see you," she said, her voice steady, a promise that carried the weight of her mother's ring. The server's eyes welled, and she slipped back into the crowd, her shoulders straighter. Maya's gaze swept the room, landing on a group of younger guests, their phones still out, live streaming the moment. They weren't just recording, they were planning, their whispers of reform and new leadership a spark Maya had ignited. She thought of Lila's words, "Because of you, I believe I can matter too." The pain of her past, the foster homes, the scoffed at dreams, wasn't gone, but it was transforming, a wound becoming a well of strength. Lila stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hall's hum. "Maya, they want you to speak," she said, pointing to the crowd gathering near the stage. Maya hesitated, her fingers brushing the ring. She'd already spoken through her data, her charts a louder voice than any speech. But the crowd's eyes, hopeful and expectant, pulled her forward. She walked to the stage, the marble floor gleaming under the chandeliers, her navy blazer a stark contrast to the sequined gowns. The room quieted, the air thick with anticipation. Elliot watched, his face a mask of defeat, his silence louder than any protest. Maya stood at the microphone, her voice clear, unyielding. "I didn't come here to tear this club down," she said, her words echoing through the hall. "I came to build something better, for my daughter, for all of us." The crowd leaned in, phones raised, capturing every word. "This ring," she said, lifting her hand, the keys catching the light, "was my mother's. She fought for a place in a world that didn't want her. I'm fighting for the same, not with anger, but with truth." Her voice softened, but its power filled the room. "Let's open the doors, not close them." The applause was deafening, a wave crashing against the club's old walls. Lila clapped hardest, tears streaming, her vibrant energy a mirror to the crowd's hope. Maya stepped back, her heart full, the ring no longer a burden but a motivator, its keys a symbol of doors she'd unlock for others. She thought of Emma, asleep with her stuffed bear, and vowed to tell her this story one day, not as a tale of pain, but of healing. The gala's violin struck a new note, soft and hopeful, like dawn breaking over the city skyline. A guest, the older woman who demanded Elliot's resignation, approached, her sharp eyes soft now. "You've given us a chance to do right," she said, her voice trembling. Maya nodded, her warm brown eyes steady. "Then do it," she said, her words a quiet command. The woman smiled, a promise in her nod, and rejoined the crowd, her phone out, typing furiously, likely to allies, to press, to amplify Maya's truth. The hall buzzed, plans forming, the elite no longer gatekeepers but participants in a shift Maya had sparked. Lila grabbed Maya's hand, her voice a whisper. "You're changing the world," she said, her eyes blazing. Maya squeezed her hand, her ring cool against Lila's palm. "We're changing it," she said, her voice low, a shared vow. The closet's darkness, the board's scorn, her mother's loss, they'd led to this moment, where pain became purpose. The ring's keys, once a reminder of closed doors, now opened them, not just for her, but for Lila, for Emma, for every voice silenced too long. The crowd's chants grew, but Maya's heart was quiet, steady, ready for what lay ahead. They'd tried to break her, but she'd built a bridge instead, and its foundation was only growing stronger. The Crown Crest Club's grand hall glowed softly, the chandelier's golden light now a warm embrace rather than a cold spotlight. The gala's energy had shifted, the crowd's chants of Maya's name fading into a hum of purpose, plans for reform, whispers of new leadership, a future unshackled from the board's old biases. Maya stood at the hall's edge, her navy blazer creased but her posture unyielding, her warm brown eyes scanning the room she'd once entered as an outsider. The silver ring on her finger, its crossed keys engraving catching the light, felt lighter, a symbol not of pain but of doors she'd opened. Lila Torres hovered nearby, her curly hair bouncing as she typed furiously on her phone, her viral post now a wildfire across social media. The air was alive, the club's mahogany walls no longer a barrier but a canvas for change. Maya stepped toward the boardroom doors, the same heavy oak carved with the club's crest that had loomed over her failed presentation hours ago. Her sensible flats clicked softly on the marble floor, each step a reclaiming of the space that had tried to erase her. The crowd parted, their eyes no longer dismissive but reverent, some offering nods, others quiet thanks. A young server, the one who'd whispered her gratitude earlier, stood by the doors, her tired eyes now bright. She held out a glass of water, her voice soft. "For you, Ms. Jackson." Maya took it, her fingers brushing the girl's, her warm brown eyes steady. "Thank you," she said, the words a bridge between them. Inside the boardroom, the air was still thick with the ghost of cigar smoke, but the walnut table was empty, the board members gone, scattered by shame or strategy. The grandfather clock ticked, its deep toll no longer a judgment but a marker of time shifting. Maya stood where she'd faced their scorn, her laptop now tucked under her arm, its data the spark that had lit the hall. The projector, once her saboteur, hummed faintly, its lens dark but no longer a weapon. She traced the room's details, the crystal decanters, the leather chairs, the crest on the wall, and saw not power, but a place remade by her truth. Her mother's voice echoed, "You're enough, Maya." The ring's keys, once a wound, now unlocked this moment. Lila slipped in behind her, her sneakers quiet, her voice a whisper. "It's different now, isn't it?" she asked, her eyes sweeping the room. Maya nodded, her jaw tight but her heart open. "It's ours," she said, her voice low, a vow to every outsider who'd been dismissed here. The boardroom, once a fortress of exclusion, felt smaller, its grandeur dimmed by the crowd's new resolve outside. Guests had stayed, not for champagne, but for action, their voices filtering through the doors, plans for a new board, calls for transparency, a club that welcomed all. Maya's charts, still circulating online, were their blueprint, her stand their spark. A guest, the older woman who demanded Elliot's resignation, entered, her sharp eyes softened by respect. "They're voting tonight," she said, her voice steady. "New leadership, starting with you on the advisory board, if you'll have it." Maya's breath caught, the offer a weight she hadn't expected. Her fingers brushed the ring, its keys a reminder of her mother's fight, of Emma's future. "I'll consider it," she said, her warm brown eyes meeting the woman's. "But it's not about me. It's about all of us." The woman nodded, a smile breaking through, and left to join the crowd, her phone out, amplifying Maya's truth to the world. Elliot Grayson appeared at the doorway, his silver hair disheveled, his tailored suit creased, his charisma a shadow. He didn't enter, his eyes avoiding Maya's, but his presence was a silent acknowledgement. "We're stepping back," he said, his voice low, cracked. "The board, I mean. For now." It wasn't an apology, but his slumped shoulders spoke louder, a king abdicating under the weight of her data. Maya met his gaze, her expression calm, not triumphant. "Good," she said, her voice steady, a single word carrying the force of her stand. Elliot turned away, disappearing into the hall, his exit a ripple in the tide of change. Lila's phone buzzed again, a news alert flashing, Crown Crest Club faces reckoning after data analyst's exposé. She showed Maya, her quick smile blazing. "You're everywhere," she said, her voice thick with pride. Maya's lips curved, a rare smile, her thoughts on Emma, who'd wake to a world where her mom was a hero. She stepped to the boardroom's window, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond the rooftop terrace, its lights a map of possibilities. The ring gleamed, its keys no longer a secret but a legacy she'd carry forward, not just for her, but for Lila, for the server, for every voice now heard. The crowd's hum grew, a chant rising again, not just her name, but change, change. A young guest, the tech entrepreneur, approached, his sleek blazer catching the light. "We're starting a committee," he said, his voice earnest. "Your data's our guide. Will you help us?" Maya nodded, her warm brown eyes steady. "I'm in," she said, her voice a promise, the ring a quiet anchor. The entrepreneur grinned, rejoining the crowd, his energy a spark in the growing fire. The boardroom, once a place of dismissal, was now a starting point, its walls witness to a new chapter. Lila touched Maya's arm, her eyes shining. "You made this happen," she said, her voice a whisper. Maya shook her head, her gaze soft. "We did," she said, her ring cool against her skin. The pain of her past, foster homes, lost dreams, her mother's death, had led here, to a room no longer closed but open, its doors swung wide by her truth. The grandfather clock chimed, its toll a gentle note, like the city waking. Maya stepped back, her navy blazer a badge of her fight, ready to return to Emma, to tell her this wasn't the end, but a beginning. The club had tried to silence her, but she'd rewritten its story, and the keys she wore promised more doors yet to come. The Crown Crest Club's grand hall shimmered under the chandelier's fading glow, the Chicago skyline twinkling beyond the rooftop terrace like a promise of dawn. The crowd's energy had settled into a quiet resolve, their chants of change, change, now a hum of plans, new leadership, open doors, a club reborn. Maya stood near the boardroom doors, her navy blazer creased but her warm brown eyes steady, the silver ring on her finger glinting with its crossed keys engraving. It was no longer just her mother's legacy, it was a beacon for Emma, for Lila, for every voice she'd amplified. Lila Torres lingered beside her, her curly hair catching the light, her phone silent now, its viral work done. The air was soft, the mahogany walls no longer a fortress but a witness to a story rewritten. Maya's gaze swept the hall, landing on the young server who'd offered her water, now laughing with a guest, her tired eyes bright with hope. The tech entrepreneur, his sleek blazer rumpled, was huddled with others, sketching reform plans on a napkin. The older woman who demanded Elliot's resignation stood by the bar, her sharp eyes softened, typing on her phone, likely to Elias, ensuring Maya's truth reached further. The boardroom, where she'd faced scorn hours ago, was behind her, its oak doors ajar, the crest above them a relic of a fading era. Maya's fingers brushed the ring, its keys a quiet pulse, tying her to her mother, to the keyholder project, to a truth she'd soon unravel. A soft tug at her sleeve broke her thoughts. A girl, no older than Emma, stood before her, her pigtails bouncing, her dress a splash of blue against the hall's elegance. "Are you the lady who fixed things?" she asked, her voice clear, her eyes wide with curiosity. Maya knelt, her warm brown eyes level with the girl's, a smile tugging at her lips. "I didn't fix it alone," she said, her voice gentle. "We all did." The girl tilted her head, her fingers tracing a small key-shaped pendant on her necklace, a mirror to Maya's ring. "My mom says you made it so everyone can belong," she said, her words a spark, echoing Lila's viral plea, "I believe I can matter too." Maya's chest tightened, the girl's pendant a jolt, a faint echo of the keyholder project she'd glimpsed in the ledger. Was it chance, or a deeper thread? She didn't ask, her mother's voice whispering, "You're enough, Maya." Instead, she touched the girl's shoulder, her ring cool against her skin. "Your mom's right," she said, her voice steady. "And you'll help make it true, won't you?" The girl nodded, her smile radiant, and ran back to her mother, a woman watching with quiet pride. The moment was small, but it rippled, a final echo of the night's transformation, a promise for the next generation. In the hall, the violinist played a single, soaring note, like the city exhaling. Elliot Grayson was gone, his silver hair and tailored suit a memory, the board scattered, their resignations a formality now inevitable. The jolly board member, his bourbon glass long empty, stood alone by the window, his face heavy with regret. He didn't approach Maya, but his gaze lingered, a silent admission of her victory. The crowd's hum grew, guests sharing stories of their own exclusions, their voices weaving a tapestry of change. Lila's phone buzzed once more, a journalist requesting an interview, but she pocketed it, her eyes on Maya. "You're not done, are you?" she asked, her quick smile blazing. Maya shook her head, her warm brown eyes distant, fixed on the skyline. "Not yet," she said, her voice low, the ring's keys a map to the keyholder project, her mother's name a truth still buried. She'd exposed the club's bias, but the ledger's secrets, her mother's role, the founding families, the ring's true weight, were a deeper story, one she'd chase for Emma, for justice. The girl's pendant lingered in her mind, a clue or a coincidence, but either way, it was a spark. Her stand had opened doors, but the keys she wore promised more, a legacy that could reshape the club's very foundation. The hall's energy softened, guests drifting toward the terrace, their silhouettes framed against the city's lights. The young server approached again, her voice shy. "Can I work with you? On the new committee?" Maya nodded, her gaze warm. "We need you," she said, the words a vow. The server beamed, slipping back to her duties, her step lighter. Lila grabbed Maya's hand, her voice a whisper. "This is bigger than us," she said, tears brimming. Maya squeezed her hand, the ring's keys cool against Lila's palm. "It always was," she said, her voice steady, her thoughts on Emma, asleep with her stuffed bear, dreaming of a mom who'd changed the world. The grandfather clock in the boardroom chimed, its toll a gentle note, marking not an end but a shift. Maya stepped toward the exit, the marble floor gleaming under her flats, the crowd's murmurs a quiet symphony. The tech entrepreneur called out, "We'll meet tomorrow, Maya." She raised a hand, her ring catching the light, a silent promise to return. Outside, the Chicago night was crisp, the skyline a canvas of possibilities. She thought of her mother, her fight, her loss, and the ring that had carried her through. The pain wasn't gone, but it was woven into something new, a story of keys, not locks. As she walked, the girl's pendant flashed in her mind, its tiny keys a mirror to her own. A latecomer, perhaps, or a sign of deeper truths waiting. The club had tried to silence her, but she turned their stage into hers, her data a spark, her ring a flame. The final note was hers to play, and it was simple, cinematic, etched in the city's glow. "Keep fighting," she whispered, her breath a cloud in the night. The keys on her finger gleamed, promising not just an end, but a beginning, one that would echo far beyond the club's walls.